The fire is almost out when the baby, still sleek with the smell of the womb, is placed on a warm chest and begins to inch forward, eyes closed, legs kicking, mouth open like a tiny compass that somehow knows the way. We like to think someone explained what to do, a grandmother with instructions, a wise woman with a list, don't move, breathe like this, feed like that. But the first manual wasn't a voice. It was a choreography wired into two bodies long before words, signals of heat and salt and milk, of pressure and pulse, of reflex meeting reflex, until a new life locks on and swallows. Start with the mother. By the time labor begins, her breasts are already making colostrum, a thick, golden, first milk. It's not waiting for a committee decision. It's there, loaded with antibodies and sugar and minerals. A liquid emergency kit packed weeks in advance. Her uterus is a storm of oxytocin, the hormone that drives contractions. The same chemical that pushes a baby into the world also primes her body to let milk down when skin meets skin. Biology hates pauses. It wants the next step ready. Now the baby. Put a healthy newborn on a mother's naked chest and do nothing for a moment. Not a swaddle, not a bassinet, just gravity and heat and heartbeat. Many babies will begin the breast crawl, a slow, determined climb, guided by smell and warmth and the primitive stepping reflex that makes their legs push against anything solid. They mouth the skin, bob their head, taste the salty film on the areola, and then often suddenly gape and latch like they've found home they've never seen. It looks like magic. It isn't. The breast itself is sending a beacon. Around the nipple are Montgomery glands, small bumps on the areola that secrete an oily substance. To adults, it's mostly odorless. To a newborn, it's a runway lit at night. Studies have shown that infants move toward the smell of human milk and even more strangely are drawn to areolar secretions that share aromatic notes with the amniotic fluid they've been swimming in. The brain doesn't have words yet, but it knows familiar. The breast smells a little like the old world and the way back is forward. Imagine this scene sometime in deep prehistory. There is no midwife's textbook, but there are midwives. Older women who have done this and watched it. The human pelvis and the human baby form a difficult puzzle. The baby's head is big. The birth canal curves and narrows. Rotation is required. Assistance helps. That's not a cultural add-on, it's an evolutionary story. Our species developed social birth not because we were weak, but because cooperation was part of the design. One pair of hands steadies, another catches, another lifts the baby to the mother's belly as the cord still pulses. Then everyone pauses because the next move belongs to the baby and the breast. People assume ancient mothers had to figure out breastfeeding from zero. More likely, they recognized it in the same way they recognized fire catching dry grass or birds migrating with the season, a pattern older than them. They would have seen animals do it, they would have seen human babies do it again and again, and they would have noticed the same dependable clues. The baby quiets when the belly presses warm skin. The baby turns the head if the cheek is brushed. The baby seems to smell something and moves toward it, mouth open, tongue down, the tiny jaw beginning that muscular wave-like suck. If this is the first child anyone in a group has ever seen, an unlikely scenario, but imagine it, the clues are still there. The mother is leaking, sometimes just from hearing the baby cry. Milk ejection, the letdown, is not a button she presses. It's a reflex that can be triggered by sensation, by smell, by expectation. Mothers tell you that even hearing someone else's infant wail in a crowded market can make their own breasts tingle. Physiology nods. Oxytocin surges with touch and with anticipation. Conditioning layered over reflex, like a road paved where a deer path used to be. That means the knowledge of breastfeeding lived in two places at once. One part in flesh, reflex arcs, glandular recipes, the way a newborn's tongue forms a seal and ripples milk backward to swallow. Another part in culture, gestures, positions, timing, a few gentle corrections when the latch is shallow or the angle is off. The mother's body says, do this. The community adds, do it here, like this, now. Even the position has a story. In many traditional settings, a woman labors upright, squatting, or kneeling, using gravity and the movement of her pelvis to help the baby navigate. After birth, the mother may lean back only when the baby is up against her chest, skin to skin. That contact is not sentiment, it's thermoregulation and chemistry. The baby's cold, wet body dries faster and warms better on a living heater than under a pelt. The mother's nipples harden and stand, easier to find. The areola may flush darker in late pregnancy, a visual cue perhaps alongside the chemical one, like a target pulled into focus. Then there's colostrum itself. It is small in volume but dense in meaning. People unfamiliar with it sometimes worry that no milk has come in yet, but those earliest drops are exactly proportioned to a stomach the size of a marble. They coat the intestines, guard against pathogens, move the first stool. They taste a little different, salty sweet, concentrated, and their profile may echo the amniotic flavors the baby sampled for months. The world is new, but not alien. The bridge from inside to outside is built out of familiar molecules. So how did ancient humans know to breastfeed? They didn't know the way we think of knowledge now. They recognized. They watched the baby crawl and root. They smelled the breast change during late pregnancy, the faint, nutty scent of areolar secretions that adults ignore and infants treat like a flare. They felt their own bodies answer the signals, milk rising at the first insistent mouthing. In time, my patterns hardened into custom. Women who had labored many times became guides. They learned which holes saved sore nipples, which angles kept a sleepy mouth awake long enough to swallow, which small tricks relieved an engorged breast or a blocked duct when the camp would be moving by dawn. There must have been missteps, hurts that went unspoken or unsolved, infants who didn't latch quickly, illness. That is where culture, again, steps in. Humans are cooperative breeders. Aunts, grandmothers, older siblings, sometimes even non-kin, share the work of keeping a newborn alive. In hard times, another lactating woman could feed a child whose mother was bleeding or feverish. The baby's cry is a broadcast. The group hears it. The group's bodies answer. And yet the most astonishing part is still the baby's pilgrimage across a mother's ribs. If you see it, really see it, you understand how little language matters in that moment. A slick head lifts and falls, an arm flings, then steadies. The little feet push, push. The mouth opens just when the nose seems to catch the areola scent. The latch happens, and the change is instant. Shoulders settle, fists unclench, time expands. That first swallow is a drumbeat saying, we've done this before, we can do it again. We are built to do it. The modern world piles on advice because the stakes feel high, and because culture has shifted birth and feeding into fluorescent rooms with strangers, machines, rules. Some of that saves lives, some of it drowns out the quieter signals, but the signals are still there. Early skin-to-skin contact calms newborns and mothers. It stabilizes breathing and heart rate. It cues feeding behaviors that work because they are older than hospitals and older than huts. The breast does not need convincing to be a breast, and the baby does not need a lecture to be a baby. The idea that the first human birth was a solitary puzzle solved by a single frightened woman isn't just unlikely, it misunderstands who we are. We're a species that crowds around fire and around mothers. We murmur, we touch shoulders, we pass water and cloth, and when necessary another body's milk. We tell stories about ancestors who did the same, and we all fall quiet at the same part of the story. When the baby's searching mouth finally finds the dark target and the camp exhales. Science, when it finally came along, didn't invent any of this. It measured what was already happening. It recorded that newborns, when allowed, crawled toward the breast like little explorers knowing the way by scent. It documented that Areolar secretions have chemicals that draw a newborn's face like a magnet. It maps the hormone pulses that contract a uterus and release milk and soften a parent's defenses all at once, welding care to survival. In a way, research gave us a translation. The old scene stayed the same. Picture the first night after a first birth. The air smells like smoke and damp stone. The mother, stunned and wide-eyed, holds a body she's never seen but somehow already knows. Around her, others keep watch. They tilt the baby onto her belly and wait. No one has to say, now feed. They can see the map unfolding. The baby lifts the head, opens the mouth, and follows a trail that has been there since before people had names. What does this mean for you? For the messages your body sends when you think you've forgotten how to listen? Maybe the reason you relax when the head finds your shoulder or why a certain smell pulls tears from nowhere is the same architecture. Scent to memory, touch to chemistry, reflex to meaning. Maybe some of the most important things you'll ever know arrive the way milk arrives. By release, not by decision. We are told that knowledge began with language. Sometimes it begins with hunger. Sometimes it begins with a baby crawling uphill. The oldest lesson we learned about keeping someone alive wasn't spoken, it was smelled, it was felt, it was swallowed, and it's still being taught every time a searching mouth opens and a body answers.